Yes.
What I was saying was, it's these kind of protests where they take the odd individual off and start asking questions.
Yeah.
And then other people get involved and just sort of generally stand around to listen in and make sure that he's behaving himself. I've seen it before where they've asked people to back away because they're having a private conversation.
Yeah.
Do they have a right to do that? Or do we have a right to be there and acknowledge what's happening?
It's a good question. I don't think they have any right as such to, they can ask you, but they wouldn't be able to enforce it. Certainly not to my knowledge.
So more charging disruption of the police.
Yeah, so that would be, you have to be very calm and collected about it. If people start getting agitated, then essentially you're absolutely right. They can step in and say, look, you're in breach of the peace and we're going to, potentially start maybe kettling people or just whisk somebody off. But yeah, I mean, I've seen both actually. One of the first protests I went to was in Reading, and a police officer nabbed one of the guys who was there and had a bit of wig on it. And I actually got involved because there wasn't really anyone else who would, step in and kind of speak to the police. So I spoke to the officer who was in charge, and I said, look, what's the situation here? I mean, are you gonna use some discretion and obviously take kind of not appropriate, but almost kind of appropriate, to the infraction, if you will. And yeah, he was quite good with me actually. He said, yeah, no, look, we're just going to take his details and we're just going to confiscate the weed and nothing else is going to come of it. So he was pretty good, but he was open to discussing it, and it all happened within the group, and there was a bit of a kerfuffle, but nothing major. There was no violence or no kind of nothing kind of broke out. So that's fine. But at a protest in Birmingham, a few of us kind of walked over to where another chap had got kind of collared by this copper, and he walked the guy over and said, look, you guys all stay over there, and walked. And we kind of, we all let him do that and take the guy off. And he had a chat. Obviously, he was a bit older and a bit more sort of street smart, and he was having a chat with the officer. And actually, the officer was kind of cool about it in the end. But one of the guys did actually go up with him. But I mean, if there's one or two people who know the score and they feel that chap needs some support, or if you're getting dragged off and you say, no, actually, I'd like some witnesses here, you're completely within your right to ask for an independent, a second party or third party to be, third party to be a witness to what's going on. And if somebody wants to get out the video camera and record it, you're completely entitled to do so. The police may ask you not to, but they can't enforce that request. So that's probably actually your best backup policy is to, if you are able to, or if there's a friend there who's got a camera, just to record everything, because that way, if anything happens, you've got a recording of the complete incident. There's no police account or your account. No, that's factual evidence right there, and you can rely on that. So that's probably your best kind of weapon. And to be honest, the reason it puts coppers off so much is because they know that if they're being recorded, they've got to act properly. Do you know what I mean? And they're a lot more conscious, and they're going to be a lot more aware of what they're doing, because they know that anything they do, if they do something they're not supposed to, or they act, not in accordance with the way they're supposed to, you've got a recording there, which is evidence, basically, and you can submit that if you ever went to court or anything like that. That's evidence that you can use. So yeah, in between that and kind of learning a bit about all the legislation and how that all works, those are kind of your best weapons, and having the confidence to to ask a police officer questions as well. You know what I mean? If they say, "Oh, please don't record me," you can say, "Well, why is that? Is there any legislation that states that I can't record a police officer?" Carry on recording them. That's what I mean. They stop you and say they want to search you. Say, "Sorry, so there's only legislation that states that you can search me without having any proof or any cause to do so."
Without taking the police station.
That's well, strictly speaking. I don't know if they're allowed to come on the street.
I'm allowed to, but science is told me.
I'm not so.
But
That's how.
research.
I know, certainly because I stop and search. No, but I know I often can't ask you to take clothes. Public, if they do, they're not supposed to move. And I've had my shoes taken off me and searched in public, but then shoes supposed to. They can only remove, obviously, apart from your jacket, but they're only allowed to remove items of clothing if you are detained and taken to the station. Yeah.
Just made this point, my brother Marcus was stopped before he was carrying, he used to have a wheelie trolley around him.
Mm-hmm.
He was stopped at midnight and they said, we want to stop and search you. And he asked them what legislation that it was going to be stop and search.
Yeah.
And they said, so we've had a description of a burglary that's happened recently.
Mm-hmm.
And he has kind of like, at the time he had like a crazy mohawk and all sorts of piercings and that. He said, well, what's the description? Because I'm pretty, I stick out quite well.
Yeah.
And then they said, well, they didn't give him a description. He said, well, you need to give me the description, otherwise,
How do I know that I am the person that you're saying I am?
Exactly. And the police officer turned around to him and said, oh, well, in that case, we're searching you under the Terrorist Act. And he actually made a complaint because he changed the legislation. Because obviously he didn't really have a reason.
Yeah, no,
And
absolutely.
that complaint was held up against the police, and I think he got a written apology from the police officer or something. But that was a bad mark against him.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So
And
that's
this is the thing, like, the police. This is really kind of what it boils down to, and this kind of boils down to any official sort of job, right? But ultimately, members of the police force, they're human beings, just like you or I. They come from the same communities as you and I come from. Well, deep down, I mean, they're flesh and blood, right? However they're true. However they're indoctrinated, with personally I call it brainwashing, but some police officers are like that, others aren't. We can't tell them all the same drugs. But I've kind of lost the thread of where I was going now. That's all right. What was I saying?
Stop and search.
Sorry?
Police officers being just human.
Yeah. That's it. I mean, they're trained in a certain way and they're taught to do certain things, and that's how they operate. But ultimately, they're no different from you or I. But obviously, they have a job, right? And they want to keep their job. So as far as they're concerned, they've got pressure from coming above them to do their job better, or to do to hit their targets or whatever. If they fear that if they don't do it, they can lose their job. Well, if they fear your complaint more, their mean as in wrong to what you think, when doing something that would cause taking a career more than they're going to target or make kind of that arrest. I think twice. Push about the first thing. Anybody in that matter, because they got legislation there, you can complain else matter if they don't know the wrong, or we shouldn't, they're not going to make, this or whatever. If we do something, if you just get getting a rent and actually, but show them, they give a little bit, and their job giving you grief, we make it shouldn't be. The harder, why you might think when they think twice about listing in their endeavours about pursuing us, that's a good because obviously they're trying to intimidate you. You can use that same as a tactic. They're back on them, showing you that you're not intimidated, you're not scared, and in fact, if anything, they need to watch their step because they are they're meant to be serving you. Unless you've, like I say, unless you've done something, unless you've broken the peace or you've done some kind of criminal act and they can prove it, there's no reason for the police really to get involved or to give you any kind of grief or anything like that. Yeah.
What about appropriate touch? So, say for example, in a demonstration, if things are getting out of hand, you haven't done anything wrong, you're just in there, you're peaceably, trying to get your point across, and you're pushed or manhandled in such a way.
Well, strictly speaking, it's you could say it's assault, and really it is, unless they've got a reason to touch you. And certainly, if you said, if the police officer kind of started rough handling me, said, "Excuse me, officer, you do realise that right now you are actually assaulting me. Please desist, or I will press charges." You know what I mean? That should be enough of a deterrent, certainly to make them stop and think about what they're doing. Whether they'd continue, I don't know. But if they did, then you said, right, okay, well, I've already warned you. I'm going to be making an official complaint that you have assaulted me because they've got no reason to touch you. That's it's invasion of your personal space, and You know, if there's no legitimate reason for them to do that, they have no right to do that.
Yeah, but isn't the problem is that in recent times there has been a lot of documented cases of police brutality to
Yeah.
the point where you've got, you know, like at the G20 protests, you know, X number of years ago, the news guy selling newspapers gets pushed over by the police, dies. And the policeman did that, got away scot-clean basically. And it's the same thing with that guy who got shot. So, you know, and I've seen it in Belgium, the police, when it comes down to these things, no, you were fighting, you were part of the people who were causing problems. So yes, you did merit that hit across the face for no reason. And I've seen cops getting away with these things. And
Well, that's where, you know, if there is video evidence of something like that happens, that's the strongest kind of strongest tool you can have, you can use. Because other than that, you know, it's one person's word against another, or individual witnesses, and you know, like you mentioned to me earlier, actually, that the police, they'll kind of stick together and they're sort of a bit of a family, and they kind of look out for each other. And yeah, they probably bend the rules in order to achieve what they think are their targets. But you know, that's looking at it as a job. And in actual fact, yeah, it's a job, but really, these people are dealing with, you know, citizens of the country. You know, they're other members of their own community. Do you know what I mean? And that's really how the police force should operate. But it doesn't. It's a business, and more so. You know, I think a lot of police forces up and down the country are getting privatised now, aren't they? They're contracting out a lot of their services to private companies.
Yeah,
So
and the police officers,
not police officers, but
and that's something that should make quite clear.
yeah.
That there are some situations where the police are the wider